Hello and welcome one and all to our info session on writing the essays for the ETA Fulbright Award. So we're just delighted to have all of you here today and just to be able to talk about these sort of foundational or fundamental aspects of the of your Fulbright application. I'm going to start by maybe just talking about just a few quick reminders about some different details about some upcoming deadlines and things we're asking you to complete. You've seen by now. You're receiving our Fulbright newsletter, which we typically send out on Mondays. We didn't do that this week because of exam week, but we will be sending that out each Monday with just a whole host of reminders, just because we know there's a lot of information out there. And so we want to be able to sort of be in that kind of constant connection with you. I know it's been a busy part of the year in the midst of a busy year and just a crazy year. But we do encourage you to read through those because we do want to send along that important information. And while I'm thinking about it here, I just also want to encourage you, if you haven't started your application online, we've asked you to do that. So please do open up your Fulbright application online. There's a timestamp when you do start your application, and so we don't know exactly how that plays into committee decisions and things like this, but we do know that committees can see that timestamp. So just to convey that you've been working on your application for a long period of time is a good thing. Let's see, other kind of initial sort of notes that I wanted to start off with here. You have another kind of deadline coming up on May 12th, where we're asking you to complete a couple documents. And so one of which is a form, so the Fulbright free writing form that you can find on Canvas, and it just lists a few different kind of main questions that you want to answer as you start writing your essays. And so our hope is that you'll take the information that we talk about today about the two specific essays, but then also with this document, that you'll take that document and those prompts that we are pulling from different components of the actual Fulbright application, and that will help sort of start you on the course of writing your essays and kind of brainstorming and coming up with the specific stories that you want to tell in your essays. So do note that that's on. You can find this document on Canvas, and then there is also another sort of information form. There's been some fluidity with the specific awarded country that some folks are applying for it, so we really want to nail that down. I know we've asked for that information before, but we really want to get a sort of sure answer about that from everyone. So there is a Google form that we're asking you to fill out for that, and the link, you can find the link on the Canvas page. It's also on our Baylor Fulbright website as well, so you can find it there. So to complete both of those by the 12th would be helpful. I should also note that document, you'll list the folks that you have in mind to ask for your three recommendations, and as well as which of those recommenders would be who you envision as working as your faculty mentor, who will be on your interview panel and will help us draft a draft of the evaluation form that we write after the interview. Before we jumped into the discussion about these essays, I really wanted to highlight a number of those things, a number of which are related specifically to the essays. Dr. Hogue, am I forgetting anything?
About the form, when you're indicating who would be your 3 recommenders and who you would like to identify as the faculty mentor from among those 3. Quick note on that: don't reach out to them just yet. We're sort of inviting you to submit that to us so we can sort of help make sure that you've got a good combination of folks. And if we see any red flags for any reason, or like you didn't include a non-academic recommender or something like that. It's also the case that if we had 10 different people identify the same faculty mentor, we don't expect that person to serve for 10 different people. And so we would want to help distribute that a little bit. So that's why we ask you to submit that to us beforehand. And then we'll, chances are we'll give you the green light and say, hey, this looks great. But just in case, we want to be able to kind of monitor that and see that on the front end. So since we can sort of see the whole bigger picture in ways that individual applicants can't. And then I mentioned in the chat, when you start your application, if you haven't done this already, again, do it soon. But do make sure that you indicate you're applying through Baylor, because otherwise your application won't get routed into our portal, and that will be important for some things later on. So just make sure that you indicate that as you start it. So that's all I've got.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Hogue. So we're now just going to sort of launch into talking about the 2 specific essays that you'll be writing as part of your application. So that will be the statement of grant purpose and your personal statement. And so you have heard us talk about these essays maybe in a distant way, and perhaps you've looked on our Canvas page. We have some very specific guidance for these essays, so that you can read through as you're launching into this process. But also, it should be your constant companion, these documents throughout your essay writing process, something you can return to, be it, when you get into the weeds with something, you can kind of lose sight of the thing right in front of you. And so it can be helpful to return to that and be like, oh yeah, that I should talk about that thing, that big important thing that I'm forgetting to talk about. So know that, consulting those documents, and always we're available to meet and talk with you about if you're kind of struggling with something, particularly during our office hours that we're going to be both Dr. Hogue and I are going to be holding throughout the summer, which you can find links to in the Times on our Baylor Fulbright page. And one other thing I will note is that we're going to, as I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Hogue here in a second to talk about the statement of grant purpose, but just sort of an overarching thought about these essays is that they need to do a lot of work in a short period of time, a short space. You just have one single spaced page to convey a lot of things about who you are and why you want to go do this really wonderful thing that you want to go do with on a Fulbright. And so it may seem like a pretty simple, straightforward sort of process with these essays, but it takes a lot to a lot of finesse to be able to put to say everything you need to say in such a short period of time. So you will. This is in part why we're wanting to meet now to talk about this each essay in these specific ways, but also B, if I can continue my list here, these essays really need to dance together in some ways. They're different, and you'll hear us talk about these in different ways. The statement of grant purpose that does tend to be a little bit more straightforward, talking about what you want to go do. and why you want to go do it in this place. And the personal statement is more of an intellectual autobiography. And so we're going to talk about what we mean by some of those things, but just as a sort of to give us an overarching schematic of what these essays look like and how they interact and work together. That's a part of that iterative writing process, is figuring out how to not only say what you want to say in an individual essay, but then to be able to connect them in some important ways. Before I pass things over to Dr. Hogue, I'm realizing that I forgot to mention, as I was talking about the Canvas page, we do also have examples from previous winners, essays from previous winners from going back to 15 years. I've been late on this. I still need to post our winners from this last year. We're actually haven't heard about all of our winners. So that I will be doing very soon. But we have basically the last 15 years or so of essays that we want you to be able to see what a winning essay looks like from a Baylor student. And so just a whole host of resources there. But I am now going to pass things over to Dr. Hogue to talk about the statement of grant purpose.
As Dr. Baniewski mentioned, the statement of grant purpose is the straightforward of the two documents, and it is the one that they will read first when they're reading your application materials. They'll read the statement of grant purpose followed by the personal statement. And so it really ought to, here's what I want you to do. This is I think something that is important. Anytime you're writing, you want to think about your audience, right? So let me start by telling you about your audience. We don't know exactly who is going to read these, but what we do know is the first screening committee that is going to read these is a group of American academics who have some type of expertise in either the country where you're going or the language spoken in that country. So it's a group of American academics, and they're going to be reading a stack of, well, it depends on the panel, but in many cases, dozens of applications. And even for those of you who were applying, for example, to a country where there are only a few applications, it's likely that these readers are going to be reading for that country plus another or something like that, right? So they're reading a bunch of these applications. And so, as we all do, if we are reading something in a repetitive way, we know to sort of, zero right in on particular things that we need to see as a reader. And so because this statement of grant purpose is the first of the essays that your readers will access, it really needs to answer some very basic questions in some very straightforward ways. And maybe this is a little, kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit, but over time we have discovered that, in the past, we provided some really long, kind of lengthy guidance to some of these essays. And, it was perhaps so much that it overwhelmed the student, the applicant, the writer. And so the student would just start writing. And we found ourselves over time giving what we felt like was the same advice over and over and over to students. And so for this cycle, we've recrafted some of these documents and tried to provide them to you in a fairly straightforward way. And your first thought might be, if you've gone onto Canvas and accessed our guiding documents, for example, the guidance for the ETA statement of grant purpose, your first thought might be, oh my goodness, they gave me a 3-page document to help guide me to a 1-page essay. How does that make sense? Well, the reason we've done that, is that 3-page document, if you haven't looked at it yet, includes not just our guidance, but some examples pulled straight from the text of past applicants, of past winning applicants, where we think the person is, has done something particularly well that sort of exemplifies the point we've made. The advice we've found ourselves giving students over and over, and this goes for the strongest of writers. We realize these are unique essays, right? These are not the same as a research paper, for example. These are not the same as a piece of creative writing, for example. I mean, there are elements of those that I think matter to a Fulbright application essay, but they're sort of unique in their own way. They have their own characteristics. And the thing that we are always telling our students is that you need to be concrete and specific all the time. In every way you can, you need to ground your writing in particularity. I am a great teacher. I have a lot of great teaching experience. You want to give specific examples of what makes you a great teacher. What were those experiences? And even more than that, you've taught and experienced a particular breakthrough that can demonstrate for your reader how you're a good teacher and how that good teaching, that good experience that you have will translate into your experience as an English teaching assistant on a Fulbright award. Purpose, that advice sort of applies across the two essays, the statement of grant purpose and the personal statement. Concrete, specific, grounded in the particular. Always keep that in mind. If there's a way to make this specific, make it specific. So, particular to the statement of grant purpose, what does this thing need to achieve? Well, really, it's a fairly straightforward document, as I've said. This is the place where you want to, tell above all why you want to do this Fulbright and what you plan to do while you're in this country as an English teaching assistant. As you know, as we've said before, it's a one-page single-space document. There are a few particular formatting things. Traditional kind of 1-inch margins, 12-point font. Cannot go over a page. If it goes over that one page, the readers won't see it. On the guiding document we've given you, again, we really encourage you to sort of use these as a guide from the get-go. On that guiding document, we've kind of identified a few key questions that you need to answer, and that you need to answer in clear, concrete, specific, particular ways. You're not asked explicitly, why do you want to do this ETA? Why do you want to go to this country to do this thing? You're not asked that in an explicit way, but the answer to that question ought to be abundantly clear to your reader. So remember, put yourself in your reader's shoes, and they've got a giant stack of these things. They don't want, as they're reading through these, efficiently, thoroughly, but efficiently, as they're reading through these things, they don't want to get to the end of your essay and have questions. Or the factual types of questions, like why does this person want to go here? What did they just tell me that makes them a strong candidate? Right? You don't want to leave any of those things in question. Those are the kinds of things, if the reader is unclear about your motivations, is unclear about what you plan to do as a teacher, about what you plan to do while you're there, engaging culturally beyond the classroom. If they have questions about that, they're just going to take your application and move it to the no pile, right? So let's not leave any doubt, right? Let's be as clear as we can be about why you wish to undertake this English teaching assistantship in this particular country. So how are you going to do that? Well, some of the things that you're also going to address specifically in this particular essay, in the statement of grant purpose, is about your qualifications, your training, your experiences, the things that you will bring with you into your role as an English teaching assistant. And one thing we really need to make clear is that you are not going to be a primary teacher in your classroom, right? Your job is a teaching assistant. you will be assisting a lead teacher who is, permanently employed in the particular school where you'll be working. And your job is to assist that person. So you don't want to write this in a way that suggests or that says in explicit terms, I'm ready to take over, right? I am ready to be in charge, right? That's not your role, and that's going to be a red flag for a reader. So you want to craft it in a way that talks, I think, in particular ways about how you have assisted people and helped them learn. How you have worked with students as a TA, as a tutor, to children or to fellow college students. Whether if you've worked as an English teacher, that's all the better, right? So what are the specific instances where you have done that work? And what are some stories? Again, what are the breakthrough moments you've had when you were coaching a youth soccer team with that particularly unruly student or unruly player who wouldn't pay attention, and you were the one that helped them break through? Or when you were working with a Baylor international student who was having trouble with a writing assignment, where you helped them break through, where you stayed with them in dedicated ways and helped them understand things that were clear insights. Those are the things that translate into success as an ETA. And so those are the things that really need to become clear in your statement of grant purpose. So when we talk about specific stories you should be offering in your essays, right? You've got one page, so you don't have room for a long setup and all the context and all the detail. When we talk about stories, often we're talking about a line or two or three that sort of exemplifies, shows, not tells, right? Demonstrates the ways that you have been effective in your particular roles as an English teaching assistant. And so, for example, the examples that we give you on the guidance document that we have on Canvas, one of our 2019 Germany ETA winner used this statement. He said, "I've learned how to explain difficult writings such as Frederick Douglass's What to the Slave is the 4th of July by translating them into easily digestible language." Now, that's a very straightforward, that's a very clear sentence. And you might say, well, what's special about a sentence like that? Well, imagine how that sentence could be otherwise. This young man, Clay, could have said, "I have learned how to explain difficult things and help students digest them." That's a very vague way that tells a reader rather than shows a reader, right? So what Clay did here is to actually anchor this in something particular, in a particular essay by Frederick Douglass, and make it sort of stick in the reader's mind. Remember, they're reading a bunch of these, and so they want to get to the end of this and say, "Oh yeah, this is the guy who talked about Frederick Douglass when he demonstrated his point." Those kinds of particular details are easy to insert, and they really stand out. And especially when you can use those effectively, I think that's going to help stand out in the stack of essays that these readers will be going through. The other thing that you need to very clearly address in your statement of grant purpose for the ETA is the specific ideas that you have for engaging with your students in your particular host country and in the particular context where you likely will be teaching. So how will you be this cultural ambassador? Remember, the purpose of the Fulbright is not just to teach English, right? It's to do that in service of these larger goals around cultural exchange. And so some of our advice for you there, again, you'll hear us say this no matter how well you do it your first draft, you're going to hear us say it probably. Can you be more specific here, right? So one of the examples that we often give for students is, don't talk about general things about what it's like to be an American, right? That can feel bland, that can feel generic. Less about freedom, we'll say, and more about, specific things. Like, the example we give you is you all probably are not all from Texas, but you all live in Texas, right? And Texas internationally, globally, Texas sort of lives in the imagination. It's a place people know, and they might have terribly dated stereotypes about Texas. They might just think of, cowpokes or something, right? And that you're not necessarily wanting to play into those types of stereotypes, but you could talk about things like Texas two-stepping and barbecue and cowboy hats, as you walk down the street. That's not an uncommon thing to see in Texas, right? Well, that might be sort of commonplace in your mind, but that's highly particular, and that's going to sort of jump out in an essay as you having developed clear ideas about particularized cultural exchange. And maybe you can do that from your own home state if you're not from Texas. Maybe you can talk about, if you've lived in a few places around the United States, what are some particular things you can draw and, talk about in your essays to say, I'd like to help my students know about regional differences, how in Texas, barbecue is one thing, and in the Carolinas, it's another thing, and in St. Louis, it's another thing. And, those kinds of highly specific and particular things. Again, I'm just sort of using that as an example. But those types of things need to be part of your statement of grant purpose. You need to develop clear ideas, not just for how you will teach and how you will assist in teaching and helping them learn English, but also how you'll help your students learn about this wonderful, diverse place that we call the United States. And so those are some things that also ought to be present in the statement of grant purpose. And then finally, the other things that you need to address in this essay are the attributes that you have that will assist you as you live and work in a new cultural environment. So what's going to make you culturally adaptable? How can they know that you are ready to succeed living in this country, somewhere else in the world for a full year? So those are going to be some important things to make clear. So that requires you to really do some brainstorming work before you ever start to write. That's why we have these free write documents that are going to prompt you in these ways to do some of that brainstorming work, not just about these are the ways I can teach or these are the cultural examples I can bring to the classroom, but also thinking about the things you're going to do beyond the classroom. So the ETA it varies by country, but sometimes it's 10 to 20 hours out of your week that you're in the English classroom, which means there's a lot of the rest of your week that you're also going to need to think about. So how are you going to live life embedded in this community, for this year that you're there? What are the supplementary things, this thing we call the supplementary project, the out of class activities? What are the things that you have in mind that would make you an effective cultural ambassador on behalf of the United States? So these are, again, we've got this all sort of in the document for you there, but these are the key points that you want to hit. And as you do, again, we want to emphasize, and we will continue to emphasize, specificity, particularity, showing your reader rather than telling your reader that you can be effective in doing these things when you're in this country. So you're wanting to paint a picture of what you plan to do when you are a Fulbright ETA in that particular country. So with that, I'm going to transition it over to Dr. Baniewski. He might have another point or two to add about the statement of grant purpose before then transitioning over to the personal statement.
Thank you, Dr. Hogue. I actually do not have anything to say about the statement of grant purpose. It was well articulated. I will say some similar things. You'll see and hear some similar themes between what Dr. Hogue has said and what I'm about to say. But this is a different essay, a different sort of essay. What do I mean by that? It's similar but different. So the similarity that I want you to hear from us is that the need to ground your what you talk about in your personal statement in the particular. And Dr. Hogue and I work with many applicants with many essays, and this is a sort of repeated thing that we say. I've also taught too many freshman composition classes to count, and so in those writing courses, that's another sort of repeated refrain that I make, that being as particular and as detailed and as specific as possible. It's the sort of constant theme between in the sort of feedback I give in those classes. So just another example to kind of further reinforce that kind of particularity. And you also will want to think about different stories about your life that you might want to share as part of this personal statement, because as I noted earlier, it is an intellectual autobiography. So you will want to, through this free writing kind of brainstorming document that we've designed for you, this will allow you to think through some different stories that you might include that are from your family history, from your sort of intellectual development, from cultural experiences that you've grown up having, have had an undergrad, etc. And to come up with several of these stories that will do a number of things. They will, in part, convey who you are to your committee. So the committee, as Dr. Hogue has noted, is reading through these essays and your whole application thoroughly but efficiently. And so, what way, what better way to be able to capture their interest, their imagination, by telling stories and stories about you. So with this personal statement, this is their chance to get to know you. They're not going to, there's no interview on the front end with these committees. And so they will know you through the essays that you write and through the biographical information, et cetera, that you fill out for the application. So, so you want to, in a very short space, be able to illustrate who you are and why you want to do this really cool thing. So that grounding, showing, not telling, as Dr. Hogue noted, that's going to be just really central for the personal statement as well. But it's more of a sharing of who you are, rather than that kind of straightforward sort of dialogue that you'll have in the or shaping of the essay that you'll have in the statement of grant purpose. And so there are a number of ways that you could take this. And so, as I noted, with family history, cultural experiences, teaching classroom experiences, and intellectual sort of endeavors. So yeah, that's sort of the at the heart of this personal statement. And so you won't just want to say, oh yeah, I've done this thing, and I taught, and it was great. You'll share an experience about that teaching experience, or you will, if you've studied abroad and studied in the place that you're going to, or another location that's conveying a sort of cultural exchange, moment of cultural exchange, rather than saying, oh yeah, I went to that place, it was great. Sharing that story and about an experience there, and giving details, giving names of people you interacted with. You can make up a name, there's no confidentiality necessarily here, but for just so you're not necessarily revealing people's names without their permission. Those details within your story, they're going to lodge within the committee members' minds, and when they're reading dozens and dozens of these essays, they're able to say, oh yeah, I remember this story from this student, and they won't say, oh yeah, they did this thing, but oh man, what a remarkable life story they have. And so it's a lot to give your life story in one page single space. You're not going to be able to fit everything in, and that's fine. But starting now, you're going to be able to fit in a lot of different elements of your story, and through the iterative process of drafting your essays, you're going to be able to do that. Let me, I want to share a few examples that sort of highlight some of the things that I've noted. Let me pull up the document that has these stories. I'm just going to read, I'm going to read a few examples here, and I will, there are many different ways to write these essays. We're sharing with you some specific things that we think you'll need to talk about, but there's especially with the personal statement, there's some level of creativity that you can have. So I'm just going to read briefly two winners and their sort of opening lines here, and you can get that kind of creative element. So here's one winner. It was a balmy summer afternoon. Quietly hopped into the car with my study abroad host, Anna. We sat in our usual silence as she shifted gears and pushed a new CD into the stereo. As her baby blue sedan pulled onto the bustling streets of Madrid, slowly, the iconic opening notes of the good, the bad, and the ugly trickled from the speakers. Instantly, my West Texas breeding had me shooting forward and asking Anna if she'd ever seen the movie. So you can tell the description of the day of the car that they're driving, what they were listening to, and the sort of regional cultural experience of being from West Texas. So you see those kinds of details in the in this person's story. So right off the bat, this kind of memorable story. Here's another example. Here we go. I remember taking a seat in the courtyard of a small clinic in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, when a woman walked in holding a newborn baby. Doctors and nurses emerged from their rooms, then convened and consulted each other around her in the courtyard. Her child suffered from hydroencephalus. The grief was palpable. That's a great opening, right? So right away, you're capturing this is conveying this sort of cultural exchange experience. This applicant wasn't applying to Haiti, but it was this sort of international cultural exchange experience, and but got was able to convey that, and then also connect it to her career interests eventually, and so but it really, the grief was palpable. You're hanging on every word. Those are two examples of a way to start your personal statement and to really convey who you are with these types of stories. I'm going to read another example here from just a way to. Actually, I'm going to skip that one because I want to move on to another example here. So if you're wondering, I know I've done this thing. How do I convey this kind of story? This example from previous winner, they, as you'll hear from my example that I'm reading here, that they went and did a year teaching for Teach for America. And so instead of just saying, the Teach for America, I taught here, and this is what I taught, pay attention to the sort of level of detail that this applicant is giving here. Here we go. My first year teaching assignment through Teach for America made me determined to pursue educational equality, as I saw firsthand how some students are denied access to quality education. I was assigned to teach chemistry at a Title I school in Fort Worth, Texas, despite having majored in English and history. The majority of students at my school are Latino and come from a variety of backgrounds. Many are first or second generation Americans. Many others tell me quietly that they, quote, don't have their papers. About 50% of my students were considered to have limited English proficiency. So a couple of things to note here is that the lead in here is that, okay, so I did Teach for America, but it also, it gives a specific sort of description of this applicants, as winners, long-term interests are to provide this kind of educational equality. And so that's something I'm going to say a little bit more about in a second, but I want to comment on one or two other things. There are other details that are conveyed here. So teaching chemistry while being an English and history major. So that demonstrates a couple things. So you may have seen through the Fulbright website and probably through some of our conversations, maturity, flexibility, and adaptability are three things that Fulbright is interested in, and you want to be able to, in the midst of conveying these other aspects of who you are that we've talked about, those are other things that you want to convey. And so teaching for Teach for America and working at this Title I school, teaching chemistry while being an English and history major conveys all three of those things. So that, I think, is really instructive. And then this applicant gives the story of who she was teaching in her classes, and so she's essentially saying, I was teaching a lot of people where English was their second language, and so as an ETA, you're going out and you are teaching people whose second language is English, and so it speaks directly to the kind of experience that Fulbright is looking for, but it's encapsulated within this kind of narrative. I did say that I would talk a little bit more about. I accidentally muted myself. I would talk a little bit more about the sort of that career trajectory and one sort of further element that you want to convey in this personal statement is how the Fulbright fits in with your larger aims. And so if you are wanting to pursue educational quality, then speaking directly to how you have the kind of experience that this winner that I just read from that she talks about, and then how the Fulbright fits into pursuing that kind of educational quality while you're on the Fulbright, but then also beyond as well. And so you have limited space, and you're not going to be able to talk on and on about what you want to, your hopes and dreams for the beyond the Fulbright, but they do want to see some level of sort of vision of that this is not just a fun trip that you want to go do, but your narrative demonstrates the things you've done, the things that this will help you do, that the things that you would do on the Fulbright, but then also beyond as well. Let me pull up. I think I'm going to stop there. Yep, I'm going to stop there with my discussion about the personal statement. Before we maybe shift to questions and the time of questions and answers, Dr. Hogue, is there anything else that you wanted to note about the personal statement?
Two quick things, and these are sort of two common pitfalls that we see. Two things that happen that often don't work well in a personal statement, but we're always tempted to do them. It's a natural temptation. So one is there's a really compelling reason to do so. I would encourage you to avoid the temptation to begin an essay that says, when I was a child, or since I was a child. Sometimes there can be good reasons to do that, right? But it needs to be seamless. So don't feel like you've got to go start all the way back at the beginning, because here's the thing. Your Fulbright readers want to know about you right now. Right now, you've got to use some of your past to illuminate who you are right now. But there's a good chance that the things that will illuminate that best are going to be more recent events, right? So you notice that with each of the examples that Dr. Baniewski read, they started right out of the gate with recent examples. So I would encourage you to avoid that temptation. The second is sometimes, we've all got heroes, right? We've all got mentors, people we look up to who have been incredibly formative and inspirational to us. Sometimes when we talk too much about those people, our readers will get to the end of the document and say, wow, Gloria's mom is awesome, but I don't know anything about Gloria. Right? So avoid the temptation to talk too much about someone who has inspired you, right? So, and again, it's not to say that that's completely off limits. It's just that you want to make sure that this is about you. That's who they want to know about. And so we don't want to give them, any reason to say, yeah, Noelle was great when she was a kid, and that's a good story, but I don't know anything about her now. Or, yeah, Faith's grandmother was amazing, but what about Faith, right? So those are, I think, two common things that we see that I would really encourage you to avoid. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we have given you a lot of information here about these two essays. So we want to allow a space for you to be able to ask any questions that you have, any kind of sort of clarification about anything. And these can be kind of broad questions, or if they're specific to you, don't hesitate to ask those specific questions either. And you can just feel the freedom to unmute yourself and just be that first brave soul to ask a question.
I do have a quick question, actually. I remember when you were talking about writing the statement of purpose, and you said you also want to exemplify what makes you a good cultural ambassador for America. What if you're not native, like you haven't grown up in America? Like, how does that affect that portion of that essay?
That's great, because I mean they want you to convey this sort of cultural exchange experience or experiences of any type, and Fulbright really wants to send out the most diverse sort of representation of the U.S. As they can, and they mean that diversity in every sense of the word, and in every sort of category. And so they want to send people that have traveled before. They really want to send people who have not been able to have these kinds of international cultural exchange experiences. But if you have been abroad, that's also a strong sort of case to make. They want to, for those of you who have not had as many sort of international kind of cultural exchange experiences, you can make a great case about your sort of regional cultural exchange experiences, and that can be as down to as specific as the interactions within a specific city or at Baylor or whatever, but it can be more regional as well. Texas, we talked about this, so that could be something you talk about. But growing up, speaking more specifically to your experience, you would be able to say, I'm a U.S. American, but I grew up in wherever you grew up, and you could say I was able to I had to navigate what it meant to be a U.S. citizen, but then also living in this other place, and there are probably other kind of cultural things that either going to different countries or other kind of regional cultural sort of distinctions that you had to encounter and experience. And so in very real and tangible ways, you'll be able to express exactly the kind of cultural exchange that you'll want, that Fulbright wants to hear. And they want to hear your unique story and your idiosyncratic, the little idiosyncrasies that are present in everyone's story. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. I don't know if Dr. Hogue has other things to add.
Is go ahead and let's look. So often, I don't know if you're applying to go somewhere where you have lived, but often there are restrictions on that. So they don't want you to, if you lived 7 years in Germany, Germany, they actually don't want you to apply to go to Germany. So let's make sure we're, in some cases that's pretty explicit. So make sure we look at the qualifications on the Fulbright site and just make sure that you're eligible to apply to where you're planning to apply.
Awesome, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Other questions?
I have one. This is sort of applicable. I mean, it is applicable to the essays, but it's also just applicable to how we think about the projects we're wanting to do in the country we're going to. Because I appreciated, Dr. Ho, that you pointed out, like, don't try to say you're going to go in and like take over this person's classroom, because like that's not really what you're going there to do. You're going there to assist and kind of like uplift that teacher in that classroom. So I've just kind of been trying to think about what is it like a realistic project and how would I convey that in the essay, because it's not like realistic for me to go in and like say I'm gonna like transform this entire community or something. I guess if that makes sense.
Clarifying question of you, Noel. So do you mean your out of class project, your supplementary project?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then also just kind of how we should be talking about that in the essay.
Really subtle thing to, and in some ways delicate thing. One, you don't always know exactly where you're going to be within a country, right? So you have to sort of do the dance here. You can't be overly specific in a way that, would be impossible if they sent you to a different region than you were anticipating, right? But you don't want to be so vague that it's like, well, how committed is this person really to this thing they say they're going to do? So one of the safe ways to go about that is to talk about something that you would do with your students. So the students who are in your classroom, something you might like to do with them outside the classroom. So if you can glean from the website description that you most likely would be working with university students, well, that gives you tremendous opportunity to explore, doing having a one candidate has talked about doing something like a sports night where they watch American sports on TV and talk about that. Or another recent candidate talked about doing an improv comedy troupe, right? So you might have seen that on the documents. Cooking classes where there is exchange involved, where you cook a sort of hyper local regional dish, from a place where you're from, and serve it to your students. And then you give various students the chance to do that for you as well, right? And so you can share around meal, with the purpose of enhancing their English and doing that cultural exchange. Movie clubs. I mean, there are all sorts of things like that, right? If you have creative ideas, I think that's great, and we can dialogue about that. If you come up with something really creative, you might want to run that by us, and we could say, yeah, that actually sounds amazing and wonderful, or that doesn't seem quite practical. How can we, evolve that? So that's the kind of stuff that we're here to help you work through. And again, like there are just a whole bunch of ways. And one of the things that we would encourage, they get a lot of proposals to do things like a film club or something like that. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. But what that does mean, that is you can take an angle on that says, I'd like for us to watch these 4 movies because of the theme, that I think will help them really see something interesting about America, that can invite some dialogue around, different cultural issues or something like that. Tailoring something that maybe is not an overly creative idea, because a lot of people have proposed to do that, but doing it in a way that is highly tailored to something that you can bring. And so maybe it's connected to a personal interest of yours, if there's a genre of film, or there are all sorts of ways to do that. So we don't want to be overly prescriptive with that. But we are glad to kind of bat around ideas with you based on some initial ideas that maybe you come up with. But that's a great question.
And one or two things just to add is that be sure that you pay attention to the on the Fulbright website, the country ETA page, and what that page says about a supplementary project. Some specifically say you are required to have one, and they give details, and some say you are not required to have one. Even though for those that don't have a specific requirement, you'll want to propose still propose this kind of group that you want to form in service of pursuing cultural exchange. And there is that, to echo Dr. Hoag's words, there's some freedom there, and to be very creative with an improv night, or if say you want to teach if it's a group of university students, or not elementary school students, this probably wouldn't work in this instance, but teach a two-stepping class or something like that. And then maybe there's a dance in that country that you want to learn, and so it could be this kind of cultural exchange experience, and you can you build it such. And so but it could be more connected to your professional and academic interests too. If you wanted to organize like a model UN group or something like this, with those kind of a little bit more kind of technical sorts of things, I think it'd be helpful to talk that through to figure out, is this actually, could I undertake this? Because that would be a significant undertaking, but you may indeed have that kind of expertise to do that. So that's just one or two sort of additional things to note there. Other questions?
Don't be afraid on that in particular. When you're talking about cultural exchange, don't be afraid to lean in a little bit to some stereotypes of Texas, or if you're from California, talk about having a Hollywood night or something. Like lean into some of the things that people will be curious about you as a Texan, or you as a Californian, or you want to sort of provide that service. Again, not in a way that is canned, or not in a way that, but lean into the particularity of your American experience, not the American experience, if that makes sense.
Thank you, that was helpful.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for being here today, and we're just know that we're really looking forward to working with you in the coming days and weeks and months ahead, and excited to help you craft these narratives. I guess Dr. Hoag and I we'll just wait around here if you have any sort of further questions as we end. Feel free to reach out and email us if you do questions come to mind beyond this session today, and or pop into our office hours.
Coming up with a contest on the fly here. So here's the contest. If you give us your first draft of an essay and we don't tell you to be more specific somewhere, you're going to get a prize of some sort. How's that? I don't know what the prize is, but you win a prize if you write an essay where we don't come in and tell you be more specific.
I like it.
Challenge accepted.
All right. Well, hope you all have a good rest of your day and a good weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.